Hello, we are the Social Studies Department, and the word social here is the key. We focus on the study of human interaction. And today we're going to look at the three questions for this project, and then we're going to go through each one of us in different disciplines and different perspectives to look at these questions from different points of view, okay? So I'm going to put the questions up behind me. Here is the first question. How are we connected to each other? And we're going to start with Mr. Grace. Mr. Grace, how are we connected with each other?
Well, from an economics perspective, we're all connected by our resources that we share and the wants for those resources.
Okay, Ms. Leonardis.
So looking in the world of international relations, simply the nature of that discipline, we look at how we are all interconnected through things like the UN, government agencies, non-government agencies, and working as a collective globe.
Okay, how about Mr. Sturmey?
From a current affairs point of view, we're connected by the conversations we'd have with each other in the market, but these days we're more reliant on the internet, social media, and of course, traditional media like newspapers and TV.
All right. How about you, Ms. Simpson?
Art and the study of art connects our insights into understanding ourselves, others, and the world around us, connecting us all together.
Mr. Powers?
From the lens of psychology, we are fundamentally social animals that rely on the interaction with others. And you can see that in family groups, lunch tables, and the friends that we hang out with.
All right, thank you. Mr. Broad?
Well, from a history perspective, we share our civilizations, languages, culture, and behavior.
All right. Ms. Kenny?
So looking at it from a geography perspective, we are all living on the same planet. We share a lot of different geographical features. Ultimately, it's one rock that we all live on, and so we are connected.
Okay, and finally, Mr. Davis.
From a government perspective, we're all connected through infrastructure. Sewerage, electricity, water, roads, keeps us connected.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question now. Question number two. Oh, sorry. Question number two, why is it important that we are connected to each other? Why is it important? We're going to go back to Mr. Grace. Mr. Grace.
Well, from economics, the reason why it's important that we're connected to each other is because we all make choices. And when you study economics, you study this idea that your choices have a direct impact on other people. And so in that regard, that's why it's important.
Okay. Ms. Leonardis.
And actually in international relations fits very nicely with what was said about economics, how we make choices. And actually as a global community, we then look at those choices and see how we can assist one another and actually be supportive.
Okay. Mr. Sturmey.
So from a current affairs point of view, it's important that we know what's going on, particularly these days where information could lead to a pretty serious consequence if you don't know about it. But not just know it, it's also important in terms of connections and communication that we study the nature of that connection. For example, the power of the social media companies and the regulation that may or may not be there. And for example, are they for profit or are they a service? These are all important questions. Not just it's important that we're connected, but it's important that we understand the nature of that connection.
Okay. Ms. Simpson.
Got art connecting our lives, can connect our lives to others. For example, creating art appreciation. We can unify ourselves together to make social, political statements. Recently, Banksy, an artist in the UK, created a piece of artwork, and through that, he was making a connection to support the workers on the front line. Okay, so art can help connect others and show support and compassion.
Right. How about Mr. Powers?
Much like Ms. Simpson said, when you look at it through the realms of psychology, the connections are reciprocal. We tend to dress like our friends tend to dress like us. We tend to think like our friends tend to think like us. We're tied together by culture, by family, by every connection that we make in our lives. So we have to be connected to other people.
All right. How about you, Mr. Broad?
Well, from a history perspective, it's important that we're connected because we can teach future generations, and particularly now It's all about oneness and wellness. And as I said, history is as old as today, and it gives us a perspective on what came before and how we can take those lessons into the future.
Okay. Miss Kenny.
So, considering geography, one of the things we look at with geography is human-environment interaction, how the environment impacts us, how we impact the environment. And so this goes back to what Mr. Grace, Ms. Leonardis were talking about with choices, because everything that we do does have a result. So it's important to understand that we are connected as we make these choices.
All right. And Mr. Davis.
From a government perspective, it almost looks like a relationship. If we're connected, you can serve the people, and you know where they are. So since they're your constituents and you depend on each other, also if you're not connected, how do you get access to roads, electricity, and infrastructure, the things that you need to live if you're not part of a community?
All right. Now we're going to move on to the third question. How can we connect people so we all thrive in an uncertain or unknown future? We'll go back to Mr. Grace for this one.
So with economics, again, we're connected in what we study at ISY is how we're connected by our economic activities. The resources that we share, as I mentioned previously, and through modeling, we're able to make predictions. And in our study, that's how we can sort of work together as a global community to share those resources, as mentioned previously.
All right. Ms. Leonardis.
It's really all about looking at the common good, looking through the lens of the SDGs, how we can all support each other, the lessons of compromise and diplomacy, and through the active debate and looking at how we can help everyone throughout the world, keeping us all connected. That's how we can thrive.
Right. Mr. Sturmey.
So the starting point is that we use the information we have for the common good, and it's becoming increasingly important, obviously, to understand the power of technology. And in terms of the spread of the internet, we need to think about things like the digital divide, which has come up a lot in our discussions about COVID-19. And we also need to look at the way that information is spread. I'm thinking about fake news. We could look at that.
All right. And Ms. Simpson.
I think looking at ISY learners and what are they going to take from learning at ISY to connect people through these uncertain times, and looking into art and art history, they can apply what they've learned in service learning, okay, and creating a piece of art, like going back to the reciprocal idea of giving that message or that creating those emotions or those feelings through art to somebody else, is a way that they can show that their compassion. Also, how to communicate throughout these times. There's been so many important messages and themes and visuals, and I think documenting that in using art and looking back on that and the in the present is a really important thing that ISY learners can think about doing.
Mr. Powers.
Psychology is particularly well suited to look at this question. The main reason is that 1/3 of the study is on social psychology, which is the study of situations and how that changes how we behave, and the groups that we are in and how that changes how we behave. And through this thing, there's been a lot of, through COVID-19, there's been a lot of moving people into groups, moving people into isolation, staying at home, and all of those outcomes are incredibly predictable if you studied them through the lens of psychology.
All right. How about you, Mr. Rod?
Well, from a history perspective, we can look at how we organize our societies. Are we using democracy? Are we using dictatorships? We can look at the social pyramid. We can look at how we're using science, technology, and art to stay connected and make choices based on those.
All right. Ms. Kenny.
So when looking at geography and this idea of an uncertain or unknown future, well, we don't know what the future holds, but we do know what we know now, which means that we have to look at the knowledge that we have and again, apply it towards the common good, the idea of what helps us to thrive. What is it we know about geography that leads towards our benefit? What are the things that we need to look at which might not be working? So again, taking the knowledge that we do have so that we can anticipate.
And Mr. Davis.
From a government perspective, I think we need to look at ourselves as a codependent community. And if you look at yourself as a codependent community, you understand that you're different, but you have things in common, and you look for the similarities, and you go out of your way to make sure you understand and learn, and you don't see different as wrong, and you avoid fear so that you can be united.
Okay. I'll come back here.
So I would just like to end. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining the Social Studies Department. And just remember, social studies is the study of humanity. And when we're talking about making connections in your project, humanity is kind of where it all starts. Bye-bye.